Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson contained in the Johnson edition. We're now at poem 58, Delayed Till She Had Ceased to Know. This is a very interesting poem because we have to infer a number of things that are going on here. And I'll be borrowing here from the great Oxford scholar David Priest as he explicates some of this poem for us. I do want to point out that we are now roughly in 1859. Emily is 28 years old, and she will write 93 poems this year, this being one of those important poems. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, again, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already dealt with our intro set of comments, and as well that you've already read the previous 57 poems we just finished with To Venerate the Simple Days. Now, in some ways, the background here is significant. You'll remember in John Donne's valediction forbidding morning, as virtuous men pass merrily away and whisper to their souls to go, whilst some of their sad friends do say the breath goes now and some say no. This idea of watching people who die. Again, most people in Emily's day do not die in a hospital. They die at home in bed and the doctor comes to them. In this poem, we infer that Emily didn't make it to the passing of a dear friend. She showed up late. She showed up delayed, as the opening line will suggest. And she will make comments about if it's possible that maybe if she could have been there, that maybe the passing would have been a little bit different, to have seen it more as a coronation and less as a crucifixion, we might say. Now, this idea of paying attention to the way in which people died and the way in which people were fascinated by it, the Oxford scholar David Priest goes to the great Willa Cather. Chapter 2, Book 5 of Death Comes for the Archbishop. We've given comments on Willa Cather at learnstrong.net, but I love this quote, so I'll share it with you. In those days, death had a solemn social importance. Again, now we're quoting from the great Willa Cather. In those days, death had a solemn social importance. It was not regarded as a moment when certain bodily organs ceased to function, but as a dramatic climax, a moment when the soul made its entrance into the next world, passing in full consciousness through a lowly door to an unimaginable scene. Among the watchers, there was always the hope that the dying man might reveal something of what he alone could see. That his countenance, if not his lips, would speak, and on his features would fall some light or shadow from beyond. The dying murmurs of every common man and woman were listened for and treasured by their neighbors and kinsmen. These sayings, no matter how unimportant, were given oracular significance and pondered by those who must one day go by the same road. In other words, it was almost as if the dying were studied to try and understand exactly how they would leave. Again, I quoted John Donne's valediction forbidding morning in those opening lines where people are leaning in to kind of listen to see what happened. Well, we're going to talk about lagging yesterday. Let's enjoy the poem now. Delayed till she had ceased to know, delayed till in its vest of snow her loving bosom lay. An hour behind the fleeting breath, later by just an hour than death. Oh, lagging yesterday. Could she have guessed that it would be? Could but a crier of the joy have climbed the distant hill, had not the bliss so slow a pace? Who knows? But this surrendered face were undefeated still. Oh, if there may departing be any forgot by victory, in her imperial round, show them this meek apparelled thing that could not stop to be a king, doubtful if it be crowned. There is an exclamation point at the conclusion of this poem, and I think that Emily is making a quick observation, and that is this. I think her point is how you die in so many ways defines how you live. Emily herself even wrote letters about those she was concerned about and asking how they actually passed, how they actually died. So we're playing the game. Notice here, delayed is mentioned twice. Delayed till she had ceased to know, that is another creative way to say passed away. Delayed till in its vest of snow her loving bosom lay, right? In other words, too late. I got here too late. We think, of course, of the famous story in the Gospels of Christ arriving to a certain gentleman's daughter too late to heal her, and therefore the resurrection is bringing someone back from the dead is the end product of that story. Notice, an hour behind the fleeting breath passing, right? Later by just an hour than death. Oh, lagging yesterday. In other words, yesterday she was living, today she is now gone. Could she have guessed that it would be? Could, notice again the repetition, could but a crier of the joy have climbed the distant hill? Maybe she's referencing the cemetery here. Had not the bliss so slow a pace? Who knows? Again, the fallibilist position epistemologically, right? Who knows? But this surrendered face, I think the word surrendered is key in this poem, were undefeated still. In other words, I think Emily is making the argument that if I could have been here with her in her passing, that it's very possible that her face wouldn't look so surrendered. It will be meek here in a second, but rather she would be victorious, undefeated still. In other words, how she passed has a lot to do with whether I was here or not, and unfortunately, lagging yesterday, I was unable to be here. And then she uses the word "oh," and I think that's a key word. It's a sigh. It's like, oh, like, you know, how we would sometimes say it. If there may departing be any forgot. Again, I commented on in an earlier set of lines about remembering is going to be important for her. Any forgot by victory, notice capitalized, right? The idea of victory in the passing. In her imperial round, in her imperial round, show them this, show them this meek apparelled thing. Notice the word meek. I think it works with the word surrendered. In other words, she died, that is true, but she died surrendered. She died meek. But you don't get the sense that this is celebratory in this poem. Show them this meek apparelled thing. It's interesting that the word thing gets used here. That could not stop to be a king. In other words, could not see death as a coronation. Doubtful if it be crowned. In other words, there seems to be an injunction here on the part of Emily that one should die believing in victory and not in surrender or being destroyed. At 2a, I think the argument is we should die with dignity, we should die with victory, we should die the way we live. I think Emily would make the argument. At 2b, well, the word picture here, death, is either coronation or maybe we would call it crucifixion or pain or surrendering to that pain, is I think central as well to reading this. At 3a, well, there's so many titles that come to mind here. Obviously, Plato's Phaedo comes to mind, the way in which Socrates is going to live out that final moment before he drinks his hemlock with a certain notion of anticipation, excitement, we would even call it victory. Finally, at 3b, how do you, as you read poems like this, how do you imagine that you will deal with your own passing? What will be the mechanism whereby that you will see your passing as being victory or surrender? And think of Dylan Thomas's "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light." I think there's some of this in Dylan Thomas's poem as well. I hope these poems are challenging you to think. Thank you.